Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 269 of the show, and before we get started, we're just going to do a little bit of house cleaning out of here because it only makes sense to do it. So let's just get on with the house cleaning. I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening. It does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly take time in your days to download these episodes, to share these episodes, to constantly keep letting me know how you feel, whether you like my stupid face or not. Really appreciate you, even though, again, you guys haven't actually seen my face in a while because we still haven't gotten the video side of this show up and running again. But you can clearly hear my voice, and you could probably still not like my opinions. But at the end of the day, you guys are greatly appreciated. I greatly appreciate you. And yes, before someone says it, I know that we took a week off. Let's be realistic, guys. Life happens. But that's still not an excuse, and that's why we have this episode coming out for you guys today, especially because I feel like I'll say this right now. I feel like every time I take a break is when there's just like a mountain of news stories happening, like left, right, and center. Some of them pretty small, some of them very big, like example, this one that we're going to talk about today. And it's just very fascinating. It always happens, but that also means we have a lot of things to talk about. But we do want to focus on this very big story that is developing and obviously will develop over time, since this was a recently filed, I'd say, lawsuit. If you guys aren't aware, if you haven't been paying attention to the industry and things like that, that this lawsuit is primarily with, well, the way it's dubbed is the United States versus Apple. That on March 21st, which is a Thursday, Basically, the Justice Department sues Apple for monopolizing smartphone markets. In a press release that I'm going to share with y'all today, essentially highlights 4 specific points that they feel like Apple has monopolized the smartphone market and essentially has created a monopoly. And during this press release, you're going to see some of these comments, and I would highly recommend let's just go through it. Let's talk about it before we develop some opinions. Because going over it and at least doing my own homework on it at the same time, there are some things that I could see, but I also feel like we're trying to approach things from a different angle. At the same time, if this lawsuit were to go through and, Apple is found guilty and everything like that, this could have some severe ramifications for the industry. But a little bit of context is important here. So, for the longest period of time, it has always been understood that Apple is like a company that was like the golden child of the tech industry, that Apple was allowed to grow at an unexpected rate, that they were allowed to grow unhindered without any legal repercussions or anything along those lines, that they were just allowed to grow. But now things have shifted, and now they are no longer the golden child of the industry, or if most people like to say as politicians, their breadwinner, because obviously now that is going to be NVIDIA with the big push for AI now becoming a highly, highly valuable company, basically being the face and the front runners for, pushing the development of AI, especially with all their hardware, software, and things like that. And let's be real, politicians do love some insider trading, so they do love that NVIDIA money, don't they? Which makes sense that Apple is no longer this golden child, the golden goose. Like, yes, Apple's still extremely profitable, but they're no longer that it factor, if that makes sense. And we've seen this. We've seen lawsuits that Apple has recently had to deal with, the one with Epic, dealing with the whole, how developers feel like they're being, I'd say, bullied into paying the Apple tax to be on the, iOS and things along those lines, and have access to the customers that are exclusively to iOS. And seeing how that lawsuit played out, now we see this one where, as we're going through it clearly states, the Justice Department, joined by 16 other state and district attorneys general, filed a civil antitrust lawsuit against Apple for monopolization or attempted monopolization of smartphone markets in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act. The complaint, filed in the U.S. District Court of the District of New Jersey, alleges that Apple illegally maintains a monopoly over smartphones by selectively imposing contractual restrictions on and withholding critical access points from developers. Apple undermines apps, products, and services that would otherwise make users less reliant on the iPhone, promote interoperability, and lowers cost for consumers and developers. Apple exercises a monopolistic power to extract more money from consumers, developers, content creators, artists, publishers, small businesses, and merchants, and among others. Through this monopolization lawsuit, the Justice Department and state attorneys general are seeking relief to restore competition to these vital markets on behalf of the American public. And as you're going through that, you can see some other aspects on here. Let me see. Here we go. I'm also trying to go through it as well to make sure that we're highlighting these specific areas due to the fact that it's like an 88-page lawsuit that they filed. Like, this is a fat document. And here we go. Yes. For years, Apple responded to the competitive threats by imposing a series of whack-a-mole contractual rules and restrictions that have allowed Apple to extract higher prices from consumers, impose higher fees on developers and creators, and to throttle competitive alternatives from rival technologies, said Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Cantor of the Justice Department's Antitrust Division. Today's lawsuit seeks to hold Apple accountable and ensure it cannot deploy the same unlawful playbook on other vital markets. And it does highlight these specific areas. The first one saying, blocking innovative super apps. Apple has disrupted the growth of apps with broad functionality that would make it easier for consumers to switch between competing smartphone platforms. Suppressing mobile cloud streaming services. This has been proven true given Apple's relationship with Microsoft. And same thing also goes with Epic and other cloud streaming platforms, that they're just not a big fan of having them on the platform, which that's why it says Apple has blocked the development of cloud streaming apps and services that will allow consumers to enjoy high-quality video games and other cloud-based applications without having to pay for expensive smartphone hardware, excluding cross-platform messaging, which this is in reference to the stigma that people have, the green bubbles versus the blue bubbles, and who's the green bubble that ruined the group chat, along those lines, that Apple has made the quality of cross-platform messaging worse, less innovative, and less secure for users so that its consumers have to keep buying iPhones. Oh yeah, this is another big one. Diminishing the functionality of non-Apple smartwatches. Apple has limited the functionality of third-party smartwatches so that users who purchase the Apple Watch face substantial out-of-pocket costs if they do not keep buying iPhones. And then limiting third-party digital wallets. Apple has prevented third-party apps from offering tap-to-pay functionality, inhibiting the creation of cross-platform third-party digital wallets. So like Google Pay, Samsung Pay, other things along those lines. If we are looking exclusively at these 5 points specifically, I could see where they're coming from when it comes to the suppressing the mobile cloud streaming services. Yes, this is true. We've seen this, especially given the fact that Microsoft has had their dance with Apple in regards to getting XPass or xCloud and Game Pass on iOS, and it was on there for a point until Apple was like, hey, we don't like the fact that the purchases are being done through the Microsoft app and not through iOS. We don't appreciate that. Same thing also goes for Epic. When Epic was doing that Epic would recommend that you would buy the V-Bucks directly through Epic and not through Apple so that Epic would get more of the revenue rather than paying the 30% to Apple. The other complaint, excluding cross-platform messaging apps. This one, yeah, let's be realistic here, guys, is kind of bad. But we also have to put into context as well that during the time when the iPhone was launching and iMessage was the feature that was included, it was proven that at the time messaging and carriers specifically would pay you or would make you pay per text to send because it was using data. Data wasn't unlimited. I know that's a shocking thing that unlimited talk and text wasn't a thing back in the day, but that's true. But iMessage existed and it did make it a free alternative that you were allowed to, with an iPhone, you were allowed to send messages for free. They were secure and you wouldn't have to deal with a lot of the, I'd say, issues that came with the traditional method. Now, this has been updated over time, not specifically iMessage, but the standards of RCS and things like that, that now we're starting to get encrypted. And now this is a big thing that the EU is pushing Apple to incorporate some of these things. When we're looking at the diminishing functionality of non-Apple smartwatches, yes, that other smartwatches could work with the iPhone, but it is also true that they don't necessarily work the best. But the same thing also can go for the Apple Watch not working on other platforms, even though it doesn't make sense why it couldn't, if that, that can make sense. Now, I could understand, especially with the philosophy mindset behind the Apple Watch, that why Apple, even mentioned this before, why they don't necessarily like having the Apple Watch work on other platforms, is that they want to ensure that they are the ones who hold all the responsibility for the inconsistencies or the, I'd say, downfalls of the Apple Watch, and not let it be the responsibility of somebody else. Because again, it's their product, it's their name out there. So they rather take the full responsibility. Now, do I think that's a fair excuse? No, not necessarily, because of the fact that, well, let's just be realistic here, guys. If I have an Apple Watch, I think it'd be also nice if I could use it on my other platforms, like, say, for example, my Z Fold 5, or for other people that don't necessarily have a good smartwatch. Because let's be realistic here, guys, the smartwatch market specifically, if we're looking at it objectively, yes, the Apple Watch for the general consumer is the best option. It gives the best battery life, the most features. It's generally the most widely adopted smartwatch in comparison. That doesn't mean other brands don't make something great or that looks great, or there aren't watches that are specialized for certain tasks. But for the general consumer that the mass market will appeal to, it is going to be the Apple Watch. So I do agree they could have a point there that, hey, it's kind of dumb that, for example, if I use my Galaxy Watch on my iPhone, I'm not going to have the same functionality. It's going to be very limited. Or if I try to use my Apple Watch on my Android phone, it's not necessarily going to get all the features, or it won't even work at all. And the same thing can also go with the limiting the third-party digital wallets. This is also true as well, because of the fact that, Google Pay, Samsung Pay are not on iOS. They're just not. That's just a cold hard fact. They're not. And same thing, or touch to tap functionality. That's another big thing. Or even if they would put them on there, or say there's a way to get it on there, it doesn't have access to those tap to pay functionalities. The same thing also goes with like Microsoft sharing their ambitions to wanting to bring their app store to iOS, or same thing goes for Epic, trying to bring the Epic store back to iOS and serve it so that, hey, if you want to do all your purchases that are in relation to Epic, you can do it through the Epic Play Store and not have to do it through the App Store and things along those lines. Same thing goes for Microsoft. Like, you can buy Game Pass through there. You can buy your game. You know what I mean? Like, it does it all from one place. And so it is true that the limiting third-party marketplaces, limiting third-party digital wallets is another big issue. And this is also, like I mentioned, with the lawsuit with Epic and Apple, and also seeing how things are going over there in the EU with Apple and the EU, that yes, they were forced to use USB-C, and now the iPhone 15 series has USB-C, and now a lot of products from Apple are having USB-C, that they were forced to do it. Now, one thing that does bother me a little bit, while I do understand where they're trying to come from this angle of trying to tackle these specific areas, I do feel like there is, I'd say, one major thing that was left off the table, that if you really wanted a good slam dunk, it would have been the right to repair, which, if you guys are not aware, Apple is notoriously big on being against right to repair, or allowing you the right to repair your own products that you own, because they don't want you to repair their products. Like, they just really don't. They rather you do all the repairs to them, pay grossly overpriced repairs, and tough luck, homie. That's it. And if you try to go to a third party like repair company, then they're either going to brick your system, or they're not going to give those repair people access to the parts that they need to actually repair your stuff. So it just becomes a whole mess. But Apple has consistently shown that they are very anti right to repair. Yes, things have slightly changed over time. Like, for example, opening up those repair kits and things like that, and like, hey, the consumer can do it by themselves, but it also is wildly expensive as well, and it's not necessarily convenient, if that makes sense. The fact that repair shops have to be authorized by Apple and certain things like that, and there's certain things they can and can't work on. Same thing goes with like the MacBooks are not easily worked on, just because of the fact that the RAM is all on a chip, it's all soldered down, SSDs and everything, you get what I mean? So it's like Apple is trying many ways to make sure that you cannot repair your devices. Same thing even goes for the iPhones. That was a big thing, because iPhones, screens crack, camera breaks, etc., speakers go out, whatever it may be, Face ID, something stops working, right? And Apple has been known to not necessarily be comfortable with you repairing their stuff. And so I find it very weird that they didn't bother mentioning that in this entire lawsuit. If you really wanted something to also go after, this would have been a slam dunk, just because of the fact that there is countless people like Louis Rossmann talking about this, like all documented, all in the courts of New York City, that people have talked about this for years, guys. This isn't some brand new thing. This is just the cold hard facts that, especially dating back from when they launched the original 2015 MacBook Pro, when they moved away from that repairable MacBook that was so easily worked on, upgradable RAM, upgradable storage. Yes, the processors and things like that couldn't be upgraded, but the fact that you had the option to be able to work on your device much easier, and then it got all locked down, then the quality went down until they made the revisions in 2020. And it's also kind of big too, especially now that we're starting to see companies shift away from that mindset of not letting you repair your devices, like with companies like Framework becoming successful in making products that are easily repairable. And, well, for the lack of better terms, you can do it together by yourself without a lot of experience, especially when they're giving you a direction guide on how to do it. They will literally do a video showing you how to put it together, how to repair certain things. And also for repair shops, if you really don't feel comfortable, you can take it to a repair shop and it's easy to work on because, well, it's all there. All the information, all the parts are readily available. It's not hard. And I feel like that was something that I felt that was just weird that was left out. But I can also acknowledge that it almost seems like in some ways this lawsuit is targeting Apple for being Apple, if that makes sense. Because let's be realistic here, guys. Yes, can we agree that Apple is not necessarily the most consumer-friendly company on the planet? Absolutely, that is true. But we can also agree that their strategy has always been a more vertical integration rather than a horizontal integration. So what does that mean? If we're going by the expectation or the mindset of a vertical integration, Apple has done this for a reason, because yes, they like to control the entire process of the chain just because it makes it easier. And at the scale they're trying to pump out products, it makes more sense to rely on a horizontal strategy that everything is all interconnected. That yes, they created the walled garden in the sense to allow a more streamlined, consistent experience. Because yes, with Android, yes, you can build ecosystems in Android, but it's also true that it's not very consistent, that there's no consistent quality, that there are obviously going to be areas that struggle more than others. Like, for example, the ecosystem may have a great smartphone, but it doesn't have a great laptop. It doesn't have a great tablet, or it may have a good smartwatch, but it doesn't have this, or it has good earbuds, but you know what I mean? Like, we start going down this rabbit hole of not having consistency, and that's what Apple has prided themselves on because of their vertical integration strategy in comparison to Google that wants the more horizontal approach, which is, well, we want our software on as many platforms as we can, and that's how we make all our money rather than the hardware. Like, we'll still make hardware, but the point is that the software is the main driving factor in trying to get that software on as many platforms as humanly possible. I do think that there are some dangerous ramifications that could come with this. Like some people have talked about before, that there is a case that Apple could lose what makes them Apple, or what makes them unique, and what makes them like such a loved brand. Now, I do agree that there is, like they even mentioned it here, the cross-platform messaging and things like that, that yes, it's almost implying that it's hard to use an Android phone, even though it's really not. Like, the whole benefit of Android is that it's an experience that you can do whatever you want with it. Yes, the hardware is there, you can do whatever you want with it, while Apple is going to be that more lockdown, like consistent experience that you won't necessarily deal with a lot of bugs, because it's supposed to be very consistent. The updates are more consistent because there's, only 4 items in the line rather than hundreds or thousands, you know what I mean? That it's easy to keep everything up to date and running smoothly, even though, yes, they have been caught in the past slowing down devices, making your batteries degrade faster, even though now it's been shown that the new batteries used in the 15 series are lasting much longer, that they have better durability, better quality, so you will actually get more out of them. But I do also agree that forcing a company to change through government intervention is a slippery slope. I just want to be honest with you guys that yes, while it is nice that the iPhones have switched to USB-C, and same thing like the EU is making them allow them to have third-party, I'd say, marketplaces on the iOS specifically, that is going to pop up where the Epic Game Store will be available in Europe later this year, or the EU. But, which also is nice because that means Fortnite is going to come back to iOS, which a lot of people have been wanting, since obviously the iPhones do have some very powerful chips, and playing Fortnite on the go on an iPhone is going to be pretty cool, especially with the people that have all those nice fancy grips. Like, for example, I have a Galileo G8. That's going to be pretty cool to use it on there, because a lot of people that have Android have been able to play Fortnite mobile because they can just download the APK. But I do believe that this story needs to have a lot of attention, because we will see some developments, and I think it's going to be interesting what happens when we go into discovery and what do we find out. Because again, the story is just starting. This is really just the initial breakdown. And look, we've already taken almost like 20 something minutes talking about just the breakdown of the initial filing. That we haven't talked about what they're going to find in discovery, or what's going to happen, what are the ramifications. Because again, we're going to find out as discovery takes place, and we're going to see what other things do we find out, because I promise you we're going to see a lot of interesting things. But I do hope that you found this episode entertaining, informative. Do you guys have your own opinions about it? Do you like using iOS? Do you not like using iOS? Do you prefer staying on Android? Do you like being, an iPhone user, or being in the Apple ecosystem? Because again, for me personally, yes, I am invested in the Apple ecosystem because I do have my iPhone. I use it for my photography gig. I have my AirPods. I've loved my AirPod Pros since I've got the originals. I have an iPad mini that I don't really use. I really use my Z Fold 5 more than I use my iPad nowadays. And yes, I do have my MacBook that I use for editing all my photos. Even though, yes, I do have a beefy computer that I can also edit on. It's also nice that I can take my laptop on the go and get the same performance to edit all my photos without much issue, if that makes sense. But for me, it's going to be interesting, and I'm interesting to see what happens in discovery, because that's where we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff come out. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Be ready for some fireworks, because you're about to see a show. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, I do appreciate y'all for being patient with me, because again, I know this episode is coming out a little bit later than usual, but thank you guys for being patient with me. I really appreciate y'all. And hey, the time this episode goes live, I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful week, a weekend. I know this is Easter / Resurrection Sunday weekend, so please be safe, guys. Have a great time with your family, your friends. Also, this episode is going live on Good Friday, so happy Good Friday for those who celebrate it. And I always like to say it, especially when it's Good Friday. Friday is good because Sunday is coming. So love you guys to death. Please be safe, guys. Don't do anything dumb. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.